Logan Mercer wiped the sweat from his brow as he trudged through the narrow arteries of Asteria Station's lower decks. The hum of coolant lines vibrated through the bulkheads, a constant mechanical heartbeat that kept the entire hub alive. Down here, the air was heavier, damp with condensation that clung to his uniform and plastered it against his skin. It always smelled faintly of ozone and rust, as though the station itself was forever on the verge of tearing itself apart. Sector 7 inspection done. He tapped his comm to log the report, receiving only static for his trouble. No surprise the concrete-shielded infrastructure played havoc with transmissions. As he rounded the next corner, movement flickered in the corner of his eye. Logan froze. Someone had just slipped through a restricted access hatch, the heavy door sighing shut behind him. Unauthorized personnel had no business near Sector 8's coolant regulation chamber. His jaw tightened. "Hey, stop right there." He barked, quickening his stride. The hatch slid open at his override code, and he stepped into the chamber. Harsh fluorescent lights bounced off riveted steel and tangles of pipes. Standing near the primary valve panel was a woman unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her skin shimmered with a soft iridescent blue, catching the light as though tiny currents ran just beneath her surface. Long silver-white hair spilled down her back, and her violet indigo eyes narrowed at his approach. The form-fitting dark jumpsuit she wore marked her as some kind of engineer, though her features were striking enough to make him briefly forget where they stood. "This is a restricted area," Logan said, his voice firm, professional. "Identification, please." The alien woman tilted her head slightly, as though appraising him. When she spoke, her voice had a lilting cadence, the kind translators never quite flattened. "Exara Nihilith, Environmental Systems Specialist. I was alerted to potential irregularities in the cooling system." Logan's gaze flicked to her hands. She was fidgeting near the massive valve wheel. Above it, a green emergency light pulsed in warning. He frowned. "Strange. Control didn't mention any alerts to me." "Let me see your clearance." Her posture stiffened, though her face betrayed nothing. "Of course." She reached for her pocket. Logan stepped forward to verify, his hand brushing against the valve as he passed. Metal groaned, loud and ominous. The wheel jerked under his touch, spinning as if yanked by some unseen force. Warning klaxons split the air. Bulkheads slammed shut around them, locking the chamber tight. Exara's melodic voice sharpened with frustration. "Do you even realize what you've just done?" Before Logan could answer, a torrent of icy water erupted from the overhead pipes, drenching them in a freezing deluge. The temperature plummeted as the coolant purge engaged. Within seconds, water surged around their boots, swirling higher with each passing breath. Logan lunged for the override panel, fingers flying, but every command blinked back a flat red denial. "It's locked down," he spat, trying again anyway. "System overrides blocked. The purge completes once triggered," Exara said grimly, wading toward a secondary panel. 45 minutes minimum. And the temperature will keep dropping." The water was up to Logan's waist now, his teeth clattering as the cold gnawed at him. His uniform soaked through, the fabric dragging against his skin. He knew the symptoms: shivering, numbness, sluggish muscles. Hypothermia wasn't far off. He took a steadying breath. "We need to get out of these clothes. The fabric will leach heat until we're done for." Exara hesitated, her luminous eyes widening just a fraction before comprehension dawned. Without another word, she unzipped her jumpsuit with clinical efficiency. Logan turned his back, jaw clenched, stripping down to his undershirt and briefs. The frigid water lapped at his chest now, every movement a slow burn of pain and necessity. When he finally faced her again, she was in a thin undergarment that clung to her blue skin. Droplets traced down her collarbone like beads of quicksilver. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering, But her expression remained controlled. "I didn't expect a human to know so much about cold exposure," she said softly, her voice trembling only from the chill. "Standard emergency training," Logan replied, forcing professionalism into each word. Still, he couldn't ignore the strange gravity in her gaze, the way it seemed to pull past his defenses. "Tell me something. Are you absolutely sure this was an accident?" Exara's lips curved into the faintest enigmatic smile. "I could ask you the same." The water rose higher, pressing them against the wall, forcing them closer together. Suspicion and attraction tangled between them, both sharpened by the freezing air. Logan's discipline held, but doubt gnawed at him. She was too calm, too prepared. And as the coolant surged higher, he realized this flood had trapped him not only in a chamber, but in something far more dangerous, whenever Exara Nihilith truly was. The freezing water crept higher, lapping at their shoulders, and Logan felt the dull aches spreading into his limbs. Each shiver rattled his frame, a body's instinctive protest against surrendering to the cold. He forced his thoughts to stay sharp. A panicked inspector was a dead inspector. Exara clung to the panel's edge beside him, her breaths visible in the misty air, silver hair plastered against her skin. Even half submerged, she radiated a strange composure. Logan caught her watching him, violet eyes narrowed not in fear, but in calculation. "We need higher ground," he said, scanning the chamber. A maintenance platform jutted near the ceiling, reachable if they could keep their muscles from locking. He gestured. "There. We can ride it out until the purge completes." She followed his line of sight and nodded, wasting no words. Together, they struck out through the chest-deep water, pushing with slow, powerful strokes. The chill bit deeper the longer they moved, his arms burning with each motion. By the time they hauled themselves onto the platform, Logan's fingers were nearly useless, stiff and trembling. The moment his knees hit the metal, he noticed the seam of a hidden access panel behind Exara. No registry mark, no safety labels, nothing that should exist in a station built to spec. His instincts prickled. He reached out, pressing against it, and felt the metal shift slightly. Exara's expression flickered too quick for most to notice, but Logan had been trained to spot tells. A flash of recognition, maybe even guilt, before her features smoothed. "What is it?" she asked. "This panel shouldn't be here." He ran his hand along its edge. "Station regulations require every access point to be logged." Somebody hid this. Before she could answer, something stirred below. A ripple spread across the water's surface, steady and deliberate, not the random churn of the purge system. Logan stiffened, his gaze tracking the movement as it circled beneath them. "We're not alone." He whispered. Exara shifted closer, her skin brushing against his as she peered over the platform's edge. "What do you mean?" "Something's in the water." His voice was low, taut with the instinctive edge of a man who'd seen too many ambushes. The shadow vanished, then resurfaced nearer, a segmented shape gliding just beneath the coolant. For a heartbeat, Logan thought it was a maintenance drone. But then a slick appendage broke the surface-jointed, alive before vanishing again. Exara's composure cracked. Her breath caught, and he felt the tremor through her body where it pressed against his. "That's not a drone," she whispered. He studied her sidelong. "You said you came here to check the system. But you knew something else might be waiting, didn't you?" Her lips parted as though to deny it, and closed again. The truth weighed behind her eyes, but she offered nothing. Only silence. The water surged as the shape bumped against the platform, rocking it violently. Logan braced himself with one hand, the other gripping Exara's shoulder to steady her. Their bodies pressed together, heat against chill, and for an instant the danger blurred with the strange electricity sparking between them. "Whatever that thing is," he said, voice low and firm, "it wants us in the water." and I don't plan on giving it the satisfaction. Exra's gaze locked with his, indigo and unflinching. Then we find out who put it here and why. A groan of shifting metal echoed through the chamber as if answering her. The purge was far from their only problem. This coolant chamber had grown eerily quiet, except for the slap of water against steel and the rasp of their own breaths. Logan crouched by the hidden panel, his palm braced against the seam. The metal was cold beneath his touch, humming faintly with energy. Whoever had built this hadn't intended for it to be found by accident. He pressed harder. With a muted click, the hatch slid open, revealing a cramped recess packed with crystalline data modules and a high transmitter unlike any station-issue hardware he'd ever seen. Military-grade, sleek and black, its casing etched with tiny warning sigils. "What the hell is this?" Logan muttered, reaching in. Exra's hand shot out, gripping his wrist with startling strength. Her blue fingers wrapped around him, firm and unyielding. "Don't," she said, her voice sharp, stripped of the melodic softness he'd heard before. He met her eyes, suspicion rising. "You knew this was here." "I suspected," she corrected, but her expression betrayed more than she wanted to admit. Her gaze flicked to the data crystals, then back to him. "Touch the wrong one, and you might trigger an alarm. Or worse." Logan opened his mouth to press further, but the water below shivered again. The dark shape circled once more, closer this time. A segmented back broke the surface for an instant, gleaming with a slick carapace that caught the emergency lights in a crimson sheen. Then it was gone, leaving only ripples. His gut tightened. That thing's not going away. Before Exara could respond, the far bulkhead groaned. Metal scraped against metal as the sealed door at the opposite end of the chamber was forced open from the outside. 3 figures stepped through, their movements precise, deliberate. Each wore an unmarked environmental suit, faceplates tinted black, and each carried a weapon designed for combat, not inspection. Exara tensed beside him. Her grip on Logan's wrist shifted, no longer restraining but anchoring. He saw the fear flicker through her eyes before she masked it. "Friends of yours?" Logan asked dryly, though his pulse hammered. "Definitely not," she whispered. "They're here for the same reason I am." But not with the same orders. The intruders swept their weapons over the chamber, beams of white light cutting through the mist until they fixed on the platform. One barked something in a guttural language that Logan's translator failed to parse. Whatever was said, it dripped with authority. "Stay behind me," Logan murmured, instinct taking over. His training slotted into place cover angles, exit routes, weapons he didn't have, but could improvise if pressed. "Don't flatter yourself," Exara whispered back. But she didn't move away. The shadow in the water surged again, striking the platform with a force that nearly threw them both into the coolant. Logan grabbed the edge with one hand and Exara with the other, hauling her back against him as the platform rocked violently. The intruders froze, lights sweeping the water's surface. They hadn't expected company. Exara's eyes gleamed, her voice low. That creature, it wasn't trapped here by accident. It was sealed in. Logan's mind raced. Contraband hidden in walls. Armed intruders breaking through a locked bulkhead. A predator loose in the coolant. He looked at her, inches from her face, water dripping from her hair onto his chest. "You want to start telling me what's really going on?" The platform jolted again, harder this time. A segmented appendage erupted from the water, slamming down with bone-cracking force before vanishing once more. One of the intruders cursed, raising his weapon. Exara finally spoke, the words tumbling out like a confession. "Galactic intelligence. I was sent to investigate illegal experimentation. Someone's been splicing things they shouldn't." Logan's suspicion hardened into something heavier, a knot in his chest. But he couldn't ignore the sincerity blazing in her eyes, nor the urgency in her voice. The water boiled with movement. The creature was rising. "Then congratulations," Logan said grimly, pushing the transmitter into her hands. "You've found your evidence. Now tell me how we survive it." The chamber was a nightmare of red light and rising water. Sirens pulsed overhead, casting everything in strobing shadows. The intruders had spread into a loose formation near the bulkhead door, their weapons steady, the black mirrors of their visors unreadable. Logan kept one eye on them, the other on the surface of the coolant below. The thing down there was circling again, waiting for its chance. Ixara crouched beside him on the swaying platform, the transmitter balanced delicately in her hands. The emergency light caught the angles of her face, carving her features into something sharp and determined. "I can repurpose the signal core," she whispered, fingers moving with practiced precision over the casing. "If I align its output with the pheromone frequencies logged in these crystals, we might be able to confuse the creature." Logan gave a humorless snort. "Might? I've never tested it in the middle of a flood with 3 armed killers breathing down my neck." She shot him a sidelong glance. "Have you?" He almost smiled despite the situation. "Almost. Fair point." Before she could respond, the water below erupted. A massive body surged upward, its carapace slick and gleaming, dozens of jointed limbs thrashing. One struck the platform with a sound like a hammer on steel, sending both Logan and Ixara sprawling. The transmitter slipped from her grip, skittered across the slick surface, and bounced over the edge. Logan's stomach dropped as he watched it vanish into the coolant below. "Damn it!" He scrambled to the edge, eyes searching the water for any glint of metal. "Forget it." Ixara snapped, grabbing his arm before he could dive. "You'll never survive the cold long enough to retrieve it. The purge will kill you before the creature does." Logan met her gaze, close enough to see the fear she tried so hard to bury. "Got a better idea?" Her lips pressed together. For the first time since he'd met her, Ixara had no immediate answer. The platform shuddered again, this time as the creature rammed it deliberately, testing its strength. The intruders shouted to each other across the chamber, their weapons raised, but their fear poorly concealed. Logan steadied himself by bracing a hand on Ixara's shoulder. She flinched at the touch, then stilled, her gaze locking with his. They were so close now that he could see the faint glow of her bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin, shimmering in response to her racing heart. "What are you not telling me?" he asked softly. Her mouth opened, closed. Then she leaned in, her lips brushing his with shocking fierceness. For a heartbeat, the alarms, the cold, the danger, all of it vanished beneath the intensity of her kiss. It wasn't desperate, but deliberate, like a declaration. When she finally pulled back, her voice trembled but carried steel. "On my world, we share breath before we face death. If you're going to dive for that transmitter, do it now. I'll distract the creature." Logan's throat tightened. He wanted to question her, to demand the full truth, but the creature slammed the platform again, sending icy water over their legs. He looked once more into those indigo eyes and saw not deception, but conviction. "All right," he said, breath ragged. "But if I'm doing this, you'd better be alive when I get back." Her hand lingered against his cheek for a heartbeat, warm despite the chill. "Then hurry, Inspector." Logan drew a deep breath and hurled himself into the water. The cold struck like a wall of knives, seizing his muscles and burning his lungs. He forced his eyes open against the sting, searching the murky depths. There, 2 meters down, the transmitter resting on a narrow ledge of pipework. He kicked hard, arms pulling him deeper, but the creature had seen him. Its massive body shifted in the water, undulating with terrifying grace. Logan reached for the transmitter, fingers brushing the casing just as the monster turned, its bioluminescent organs pulsing with an angry crimson light. It closed the distance in a blur of movement, limbs unfurling like whips, Logan yanked the device free and shoved off the ledge, driving upward with every ounce of strength left in his freezing limbs. The water roared in his ears, his chest burned for air. He knew the creature was faster dot, and then light. A burst of dazzling, rippling light flooded the water, casting everything in strange, hypnotic patterns. Logan twisted his head just enough to see Ixara above, standing at the edge of the platform, her entire body glowing with waves of bioluminescence. The creature faltered, its movements suddenly erratic. As though entranced by her display, Logan broke the surface in a gasping roar, the transmitter clutched in his numb hands. Ixara reached down, catching his arm, her grip stronger than it had any right to be. She hauled him back onto the platform, pulling him close, her forehead pressed briefly to his in relief. "You're insane," she whispered. "Efficient," he rasped, shivering violently. He shoved the transmitter into her hands. "Now make it work before that thing remembers it's hungry." The chamber still rattled with the creature's fury when the emergency sirens shifted pitch, a deeper, more ominous wail that made Logan's blood run colder than the purge already had. He knew that sound. It wasn't local containment anymore. It was system-wide. A voice crackled over the intercom, distorted by static. "All personnel, this is not a drill. Reactor cooling failure detected. Core temperature rising." Logan's gaze snapped to Ixara. She had already paled, her eyes darting to the status monitors mounted above the chamber. Red lines scrolled endlessly across them, critical alerts stacking faster than she could read. "They sabotaged the cooling system," she breathed. "If the reactor breaches, half the station goes with it," Logan finished grimly. The intruders had already retreated, slipping back through the breached bulkhead. The creature thrashed at the far side of the chamber, distracted for the moment. But Logan knew they didn't have minutes to spare, let alone hours. He turned to Ixara, who was still clutching the dripping transmitter to her chest. "We need to get to the auxiliary control node. Now." She blinked once, then nodded sharply. Together they clambered down from the platform, wading through the rising coolant toward the secondary hatch. Logan's muscles screamed with cold, but adrenaline pushed him forward. The corridor beyond the chamber was a mess of flashing lights and shuddering walls, the deep vibrations of the reactor failure making it feel like the station itself was groaning. They sprinted through the twisting shafts, each step echoing in the confined space. Emergency bulkheads had dropped randomly throughout the sector, forcing them to crawl through half-open doors and climb past twisted pipes that spat steam. The whole station felt alive, restless and angry. At last they burst into the auxiliary control room. It was chaos, sparking conduits, shattered displays, coolant dripping from overhead lines. The main console screamed a litany of warnings, each more urgent than the last. Logan moved instinctively to the console, his training resurfacing. He'd studied these systems 100 times, run drills for every nightmare scenario the engineers could imagine. But this was worse. The primary coolant lines had been severed virtually at the root. Heat levels spiked in red arcs across the display. "It's not just sabotage," he said, fingers flying across the keys. "They've locked out control from Central. Whoever's pulling the strings, they want this reactor to fail." Ixara joined him, her movements precise, her alien physiology granting her an intuitive sense for the system's pulse. She pressed her glowing palm against the terminal, interfacing directly. The screen flickered, stabilizing under her touch. "We can reroute through the secondary coolant system. If we do it in tandem, it might keep the reactor under critical threshold long enough to stabilize." Logan's eyes flicked to her, absorbing the tension in her voice, the glow spreading beneath her skin as she pushed her energy into the system. "Tandem?" She nodded toward the far side of the room, where a second terminal blinked with red error lights. "The system requires simultaneous activation. Both nodes must be triggered within half a second of each other." If we're off, the thermal shock will blow the core apart. Logan swallowed hard, already moving to the second terminal. His hands trembled not from fear, but from the cold creeping deeper into his muscles. He glanced back at her. She looked impossibly steady, her skin glowing softly in the emergency light, her silver hair plastered to her temples. "If we miss by even a fraction," she said quietly, "this entire section of the station will be vaporized." Their eyes locked across the room. For a moment, the alarms, the sparking wires, the stink of coolant, all of it blurred away. There was only her, calm and unyielding, and him, desperate to prove he could match her resolve. "Then we won't miss," Logan said. His voice was steady, even if his hands weren't. "I trust you." For the first time since the purge began, her composure cracked, not with fear, but with something warmer. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then we do this together." They counted down, her voice steady, the rhythm syncing with the pulsing glow of her skin. 3, 2, 1. Logan slammed his command key at the same instant. Exara triggered hers. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the room shook violently, alarms screaming, the reactor's heat spiking so high he felt it like a wave rolling through the deck plates. Then, slowly, blessedly, the warnings began to die away. One by one, the red lights flickered to yellow, then to green. The shrill alarms softened to a steady hum. Core temperature dropping. Reactor stabilizing. Logan exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, sagging against the console in exhaustion. Across the room, Exara slumped too, her glow dimming, but her eyes found his. Relief flashed there, and something deeper. He crossed the distance in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. The kiss that followed wasn't calculated, wasn't ritual, wasn't camouflage. It was raw and real, born of survival and the exhilaration of saving lives together. When they finally broke apart, she leaned against his chest, her voice soft but edged with wonder. "You humans, always so reckless, so impulsive," Logan chuckled, tightening his hold on her. "And you aliens, always so secretive." He tilted her chin so their eyes met again. "But maybe that's why we work." Outside, the reactor's hum steadied, the station spared for now. Inside, on that ruined deck, something far more volatile had ignited. The steady hum of the reactor was a balm, but Logan knew it wouldn't last. Stabilizing the core bought them time, minutes, maybe an hour, but it didn't end the conspiracy unraveling around them. He pulled back from Exara, his breath still ragged, and forced his thoughts into order. "Containment first, answers second," he said, already scanning the auxiliary console for any link back to central control. Exara had straightened too, her silver hair hanging in wet ropes over her shoulders, her glow faint but steady. "Agreed, but Holt won't wait for us to report in. If he's tied to this, he'll already be moving to bury it." The name dropped like a weight in Logan's stomach. Commander Holt, the man who'd given him his first promotion, who had lectured about chain of command until his voice went hoarse. Logan wanted to believe the man incapable of treachery. But the sabotage, the intruders, the creature, it fit too neatly. Their units crackled to life. "Inspector Mercer, this is Lieutenant Park. Do you copy?" Logan snapped his unit to his mouth. "I'm here." "Good. We picked up a coded transmission routed to Docking Bay 7. Unauthorized. Cargo transfer under diplomatic seal. You need to see this." Exara met his eyes, and both moved without another word. They pushed through steaming corridors, the station trembling under the aftershocks of the reactor scare. Alarms still wailed, but more distant now, like a warning echo rather than an imminent death knell. As they rounded a junction, Park appeared with 4 trusted officers, weapons slung but ready. Her close-cropped hair was plastered to her forehead, her expression grim. "Glad you made it," she said, offering Logan a curt nod before glancing to Exara. "Is her?" Exara answered before Logan could. "Exara Nihilith, Galactic Intelligence." "And before you ask, yes, Holt's compromised." Park didn't flinch. "I figured as much." "Come on." They reached the observation deck overlooking Docking Bay 7, and Logan's jaw clenched at the scene below. A sleek Taran transport crouched on the deck, its engines idling with predatory patience. Around it, men in environmental suits were loading massive containment pods onto gravlifts. Beside them stood Holt, speaking with a tall, gaunt alien draped in ceremonial robes. Even through the viewport, Logan recognized the elongated features and jeweled crests of a Terran dignitary. "Ambassador Vex," Exara hissed. "The hegemony's butcher." "I knew he'd surface eventually." Park keyed the console, bringing up the bay's feeds. "They're invoking diplomatic immunity." Holt sealed the bay under Protocol 17, claimed it's a cultural exchange. Logan's hands curled into fists. "Cultural exchange my ass. Those pods are full of weapons." "Or worse." Exara pulled the transmitter from her belt, its casing still dripping. "We have the evidence. Research logs, genetic data. If we can broadcast this to the station systems, everyone will see it?" Logan looked at Park. "How long before that ship clears lockdown?" 15 minutes, maybe less," she said. "But Holt has half the security division eating out of his hand. If we go in blind, we'll be cut down before we reach the cargo." Exara was already at the console, her glowing palm interfacing with the system. The screen flickered, bending under her bioelectrical patterns. "I can override the environmental controls. Trigger a containment breach in the bay. That supersedes diplomatic seals." Park's lips tightened into a fierce smile. "That would lock them in, force all eyes onto the bay." Logan moved beside Exara, close enough to feel the heat radiating from her skin despite the cold air. "Can you patch the evidence into the station-wide feed while you're at it?" Her eyes flashed indigo fire. "Watch me." The deck vibrated underfoot as containment alarms blared across the bay. Massive bulkhead doors began to descend, trapping the Terran ship before it could launch. Holt spun toward the observation deck, his face hardening as he spotted them. Vex's jeweled crests shimmered, his voice rising in sharp protest that bled even through the thick glass. "Do it now," Logan urged. Exara's glow intensified, cascading waves of light rippling across her skin as she forced the system into compliance. With a final surge, the feeds lit up across the station corridors, plazas, civilian quarters. Screens flickered with files pouring from the transmitter, splicing logs, financial records, images of hybrid creatures sealed in containment pods. And the worst of it all, a line of genetic code tagged with a species identifier. "Homo sapiens." Gasps rose from the officers around them. Park's jaw slackened, her eyes hardening with fury. They were building weapons designed to target humans. Exara's voice was low but steady. "And they stole the science from my people to do it." Below, chaos erupted. Station security loyal to Holt turned on those who weren't. The Tyrans scrambled to secure their cargo, Vex's shield flaring as stun fire lit the bay. One of the pods slipped from its gravlift, shattering as it struck the deck. The sound that followed was no alarm. It was a roar. The creature that emerged dwarfed the one in the coolant chamber, 3 meters of jointed muscle and bioluminescent fury. Its sensory organs pulsed red as it surged forward, scattering men like insects. Exara's hand closed around Logan's wrist, her skin burning hot now, alive with energy. "We need to stop it," Logan nodded once, adrenaline surging. "Then let's finish this." The docking bay dissolved into pandemonium. Sparks from stunfire streaked through the haze, alarms shrieked, and the unleashed creature rampaged across the deck. Its segmented limbs slammed into cargo containers, sending them tumbling like toys. Station personnel scattered in every direction, some cut down by the sweep of its appendages, others frozen in shock as the beast's bioluminescent organs pulsed with furious red light. Logan tightened his grip on the sidearm he'd salvaged from one of Park's officers. Futile or not, it was all he had. Beside him, Exra's glow intensified until it painted the entire observation deck in waves of shifting blue and white. She leaned over the railing, eyes locked on the monster. It's resonating with the same control pattern as the one in the coolant chamber. If I amplify my bioelectric output, I might be able to disrupt it. Might? Logan shot her a look. That's not the most reassuring word right now. Her mouth curved into a thin smile, even as chaos swirled below. You humans and your need for guarantees. Just keep it off me long enough to break its rhythm. Park barked orders to her team, holding the line at the blast doors, while Logan and Ixara raced down the stairwell into the bay. The air was thick with the metallic tongue of coolant and the ozone bite of weapons fire. Holt stood near the Terran ambassador, his face pale but defiant, shouting into a comlink for reinforcements. Vex, shield shimmering, pointed toward Ixara, as if he already understood the threat she posed. There! Logan grabbed Exara's arm, yanking her behind a toppled container just as a bolt of plasma seared past. Looks like you're their priority target. They should be more worried about that. She nodded toward the creature, which was bearing down on a cluster of unarmed civilians trapped against the bulkhead. Logan swore under his breath and broke cover, firing 3 quick shots to draw the beast's attention. The rounds sparked uselessly off its carapace, but it worked. The creature pivoted toward him, limbs whipping through the air like living scythes. He dove aside as one smashed into the deck where he'd been standing. Logan! Exra's voice rang out, charged with urgency and something deeper. She had stepped into the open, her skin blazing with bioluminescence. Patterns rippled across her body in a complex rhythm, her entire form a beacon of living energy. The creature froze mid-lunge, its limbs twitching, its own organs shifting from crimson to a confused violet. Logan scrambled back to his feet, keeping his weapon trained on Holt, who was edging closer with murder in his eyes. Ixara, it's working. Hold it. The shout died as he caught motion to his left. Ambassador Vex, his shield still crackling, had raised a sleek weapon of his own and taken aim not at Logan, but at Ixara. Instinct overtook thought. Logan lunged, throwing himself into her just as the blast ripped through the space she'd occupied. Agony tore across his shoulder as the shot grazed him, the force spinning him into her arms. Logan! She caught him, eyes wide, glow faltering. I'm fine, he gritted out, though his vision blurred at the edges. He forced a weak grin. You just finish it. Her expression hardened, determination flaring brighter than her fear. She lowered him gently, then rose to her full height, arms spreading as her glow built into a blinding storm. The patterns across her skin accelerated into a strobing cascade, every pulse resonating with the creature's organs. The monster shrieked, a sound that rattled every bone in Logan's body. Its limbs thrashed wildly, then stuttered, its body convulsing under the assault of her resonance. With a final wrenching cry, it collapsed onto the deck, its bioluminescence guttering out like dying embers. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of coolant steam. All eyes turned to the center of the bay, where Ixara still stood, glowing faintly, her chest heaving with the effort of what she'd done. Holt staggered backward, disbelief carved into his face. Vex's shield flickered as Park's team closed in, weapons raised. With precision born of fury, they cut his defenses down and drove him to his knees. Logan pressed his good hand to his wound, struggling upright. He caught Exra's gaze across the deck, and for the first time since the coolant purge, her composure cracked fully not with fear, but with relief. She crossed to him quickly, helping him steady. "It's over," she whispered. "Not yet." Park strode forward, kicking Holt's weapon away. "We need to know why." Exara's eyes hardened, her glow flickering back to life. "Because this technology wasn't theirs to begin with." She looked at Logan, then the others. "The Tarans stole it from my people, the Lion. We developed genetic therapy to heal. They twisted it into this." She gestured to the fallen creature. "A weapon designed to target humans first." The words hit Logan like a gut punch. He'd suspected, but hearing it spoken aloud carved the truth into stone. The station, humanity itself, had been one heartbeat from annihilation. Park's expression darkened, but she nodded. "Then we'll make sure the galaxy knows." Later, after the chaos subsided and Holt and Vex were in custody, Logan stood in the docking bay's ruined silence. Exara was beside him, her silver hair damp, her glow soft and steady now. He took her hand without hesitation, feeling the warmth of her skin against his chilled fingers. "You saved a station?" he murmured. She shook her head, eyes shining. "We saved it." Above them, the stars burned cold and distant, but for the first time, Logan felt something else stirring, something warmer, messier, infinitely more complicated. He squeezed her hand, and she squeezed back, their silence carrying a promise that no purge, no betrayal, no alien weapon could ever erase.